So if you're like, wow, you're trouble, what are we gonna do with you? And she goes, I don't know, what are we gonna do with me? She's established some premise, okay? So if she's agreeing with your frames, if she's going along with your frames, if you do a you're so X, it's just like Y, we should Z, and she goes, yeah, and then if we did that, we'd also. Now what about what he said? You say something premisey, and she doesn't reject it, she doesn't accept it. Actually, I'm gonna ask you to be more clear on that. Does she neither reject it nor accept it, but she noticed it, or does she not even seem to notice it? Because those are two different things.
No, she noticed it.
She noticed it, didn't reject it. Have you achieved premise or not? No, probably not. Are you closer to achieving premise than you were before you said the premisey thing?
Yeah.
Yes. So if you were to say another one and she neither accepted nor rejected it, and you said another one and she neither accepted nor rejected it, if you did that enough, would you eventually have established premise?
Yes.
I would argue yes. There gets a certain point where it's just like any logical person has got to realize that like you've done enough. You've made premise a big enough part of what's going on that sort of like on preponderance of evidence, like it is premisey, right? Now, how much that is kind of a bit of a judgment call, but there is a point where if the girl is not going along with, like not participating in it, but she's not explicitly rejecting it, you can just say, listen, man, I've made it super fucking clear. If this girl doesn't get it yet, she's just stupid, right? At that point, you can kind of assume it, right? It's not the ideal scenario, but it definitely can work. And sometimes it may be the girl's just shy, and so she's not participating. Maybe she feels nervous around you. She feels like you're very high value. She doesn't want to embarrass herself. Those kind of things. Or maybe she feels judged in a particular situation, like her friends might, whatever. So there may be various reasons why that might be the case, right? But if you've just done enough premisey things, at some point you have done it just because you've just made it so fucking super clear. Right? So again, it's a little bit of a judgment call, but it's two things. It's one, have you put premise into the conversation? And then two, has she either accepted it overtly or has she kind of accepted it by default by not objecting several times? If you do something premisey and it doesn't seem to be noticed at all, that's kind of still fine. Because it's in no way worse than if you hadn't said that thing, right? So sometimes you'll do something premisey that's like super subtle and she seems to totally ignore it. So what? You're still in the exact same position as if you'd never said that premisey thing. And that's completely fine, okay? So it's not really a bad thing. And by the way, here's an interesting trick question. Is there such a thing as too much premise?
Yes.
There's no such thing as too much premise. There is such a thing as premise being established in a weird way. There is such a thing as being too gamey. There's such a thing as being like uncalibrated, all kinds of things like that. But there's no such thing as too much premise. You know the most premisey thing you can do?
Have sex.
Have sex. There's no such thing as too much premise. There is such a thing as being overly try-hard about establishing premise or being awkward about premise or being uncalibrated and only establishing premise and never moving the step forward to other things. But you can continue to establish premise throughout the set. There's no such thing as too much premise. By the way, if you do premise and the girl gives you a shit test and then you pass the shit test and she like giggles or drops her frame, have you established premise?
Yeah.
Yeah. It is good in terms of establishing value. But it also means oftentimes that there was something a little bit gamey or put on that got the shit test in the first place. So good and bad.